Hello, everyone. I'm starting to see the attendees numbers going up, so I know some of you are joining us. We're just going to wait for everybody to trickle in before we really get started, so we're going to give that about a minute or so. In the interim, if you have joined us, you could go ahead and let us know where you're coming to us from in the chat if you'd like. I know today is a different time zone, so welcome everyone that has come back for day 3 at a different time, and welcome to everyone who hasn't been able to join us live because the time zone wasn't amenable to your location. So, Anne from England, you and Lynn, I know are up really late tonight, so thank you. I know some folks will continue to join us, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started so that we can dive right in to our first session of the third and last day of PxP. And I just want to thank you all for joining us today. As I said, this is the last day of the PxP conference, and if you've been able to join us the first 2 days, I think you can agree with me that it's been a huge success so far, and I'm looking forward to continuing that today. Today is all about patient engagement and research. All of PxP has been about patient and public partnership in research. And while PxP has been designated for and by patient partners, of course, everybody who is interested in patient and public partnership in research is welcome. I'm Joletta Belton. I'm a member of the International Steering Committee of PxP that has designed and developed all aspects of this conference. And we, as a steering committee and as PxP, want to acknowledge that we are being joined today by people from all across the globe on land that has been stewarded by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. I am coming to you from Fraser, Colorado, where we are in the midst of a thunderstorm, so hopefully that won't affect my connectivity. But I'm here in Fraser, Colorado, the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne and Ute, with the Arapaho just to the east of our valley. I recognize and honor these Native nations, their peoples, and their continued connection as the original stewards of the lands and waters where I live today. Throughout the world, colonization, personal, social, and structural violence, and forced removal of people from their homelands has caused devastating and lasting impacts, the harmful effects of which are still present today, including in research and healthcare. I give this acknowledgement in hopes that by reflecting on our collective history, we can create and sustain a more ethical and just future through love, connection, inclusion, and respect. I know my land acknowledgement is imperfect and insufficient. It is just a start, and there is much work to do. I also realize that such a practice may be new to many of you in our virtual international audience. So we at PxP encourage you to spend some time learning about and reflecting on what a land acknowledgement means, and we'd love for you to share your own land acknowledgement in the chat if you would like to do so. I would also like to acknowledge that I'm a middle-class, middle-aged white lady whose ancestors come to what has been colonized as North America from Ireland, the UK, and Lebanon. I'm a medically retired firefighter paramedic who has lived with pain and struggled to find the right resources, support, and care, and so became an accidental advocate like many of you here today. My advocacy work led to patient partnership work, and now I largely work in the space of patient and public involvement and engagement in pain research, publishing, education, and practice. I'm a member of research teams around the world, and I'm really excited to facilitate the meeting today. Just a brief word about words, as I've been using terms like patient partner and patient and public involvement, and I realize in other parts of the world, different words are used, including patient, patient researcher, patient research partner, consumer, community partner, community engagement, participatory action, community-driven research. All of these terms kind of fall under the same umbrella of what we're talking about today, which is just how different types of lived and living experience can contribute to research, and how people with lived and living experience are working as partners in research. Some housekeeping notes. Today we'll have 3 sessions about how to strengthen research partners, raising the benchmarks for best practice. The first session is on facing up to the challenges of being a patient partner in research. The second is on including all voices in pain research. And the last session today and of the entire conference is about amplifying outputs and impacts of research. There will be a 30-minute break between each session, and all sessions will be using this same link. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing the speakers or the moderators of each session, as we'll allow them time to introduce themselves in the ways they would like to. But you can check out everybody's bios on our website, which should be included in the chat. During the course of the sessions today, please put any questions that you may have for our speakers in the Q&A box, not the chat. We'll be monitoring both, but your question will be seen more readily in that Q&A box. We'll try to get it to as many questions as possible in each of the sessions. We do still want you to use that chat function to chat with your mates, meet new folks, share resources, and please use the Zoom emojis. I see them coming up on the screen already. We all love to see those emoji reactions in real time. Closed captioning is available by selecting the CC button at the bottom of your screen, and then you can select the language that you would like to see the closed captioning in. And our social media hashtag is hashtag PxP23. Share anything you wish, and please know that all of the sessions are recorded and will be posted on the PxP website after the conference for those who couldn't join us live and for you to rewatch or to share with your friends. This being the last day, I just want to say a final thank you to the Canadian Institutes of Health Research's Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis, or IMPA for short, for their support in making the PxP conference a reality and a success. I want to especially thank Dawn Richards, the true maker of all this magic, Hedy Mulhall, who has made us all look and sound so good, Rosie Toomey, the Associate Scientific Director of IMHA, and Karim Khan, the IMHA Scientific Director, who has ensured this magic can happen this year and for years to come. To get settled into Zooming, let's get a little interactive before we jump into the first session and have a poll inviting you to share what perspectives you're bringing to the sessions today. And you can check as many boxes as you would like to as that comes on the screen. And sorry, panelists, but you can't join in the poll because that's just a Zoom thing. I don't know if the poll is up. I don't see it, but we will get, oh, there it is. So go ahead and please share the perspectives that you're bringing. Just a reminder to keep active in the chat throughout the sessions. Use those reaction emojis and put all your questions in the Q&A box. And I'm going to hand things over to Janelle Bowden as moderator of session 1, Facing Up to the Challenges, honest discussions about overcoming real-world risks for patient partners. Janelle, over to you.
Morning, everyone, and thanks, Jo. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're joining us from around the world today. My name's Janelle Bowden. I'm founder of Access CR, which is a social enterprise that provides services to the research sector around patient engagement and clinical trials. And I do that because I believe there's a need for supporting, understanding, listening to the views of people that are looking for, are involved in and participating in research. So the group that I call CREW, the Consumer and Community Research Workforce. I'm moderating the session today from Sydney, Australia, from the lands and waters looked after for thousands of years by our First Nations people and never ceded to them. In my local area, that is the Wallumattagal clan, and so I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, as well as any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people that are joining the session today. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to moderate this session and thank the organising committee for inviting me. It's about the realities of being a patient or a consumer partner, and consumer is a language we tend to use in Australia, so please forgive me if I drop into that. What it feels like to enter into research environments where you may or may not feel familiar, how it may or may not always be what you expected, and importantly, how to have the confidence to input and look after yourself. Most of us get into this kind of work or giving back because we want to make a difference to prevent others from going through something we've gone through. We can be passionate, and not everyone we encounter is ready for that, is open to listening and partnership, or worse, recognises the burden and toll that it can take. Equally, there are things that we might like to learn or do to be effective partners. We're so lucky to have three really experienced patient partners in Patrick Gee, Sabrina Poirier, and Lynn Laidlaw, to share their journeys and experiences with us today. We cover the world with this panel, so I'd really like to iterate the differences in language that we might use. I'd like to invite you to review the panelists' full bios online, and I think Dawn's already dropped that link into the chat for you. I will also invite them, though, to briefly introduce themselves as they get into each of their own stories in a moment. So the plan for today is to begin with each of the panelists sharing a little bit about their journey and to pull out some of those different challenges that they have each experienced along the way. And then we're going to explore some of those issues a little further as a panel. When we had our planning discussion, we went down a lot of different paths and decided we needed way more time than an hour. So I am going to try and keep to time, but if the conversation is flying around something really valuable, I will ask your forgiveness in advance if we end up going over by up to about 5 minutes. If we need to, we can continue the conversation on Twitter, as mentioned, using the hashtag PxP23. And as we continue along today, I would encourage you to share in the chat any experiences you might have had as a new or experienced patient partner, and any top tips you have for overcoming the challenges you've experienced or that you've heard the panelists talking about. I know the panelists are up to learning from, relating to, and challenging each other, and I hope you will also be up for that constructive, honest dialogue amongst peers. So if you have any questions for the panelists, please drop them into the Q&A as mentioned, rather than the chat, just to make sure that we don't miss them. And the panelists may take the opportunity to answer those directly online as we go along. So let's get started by talking about each of your journeys, being a patient partner, and some of the challenges or risks that you've seen along the way of being involved in research. Patrick, I'm going to open the floor to you first to share your path and experiences.
Thank you. So my name is Patrick Gee. I currently reside in the United States in Richmond, Virginia. I live with diabetic kidney disease, and as a person of African descent, I've experienced tokenism, racism, some acceptance, and rejection. So, you know, when I think about tokenism, for certain committees that I've actually worked on, as a healthcare consultant and a professional patient advocate, a lot of organizations don't see the professional. They just see somebody who is a patient. In the United States, a lot of times the mention of the word patient can give the connotation that somebody is weak, lacks any academic or intelligence, lacks any gifts or talents, just a checkbox. And when you deal with people with chronic disease, we're more than our disease state. We're more than a checkbox. And it takes a great deal of work to try to fight through being a checkbox, but always having to elevate your voice to let folks know that you are actually a human being with certain skill sets that you've acquired throughout your adulthood. When I think about racism, I'm not sure why there's so much hate, not just in the United States, but in the world. Even now, as a person living with chronic kidney disease, it's almost like you have a target on your back. I know a lot of my peers and colleagues, regardless of their nationalities or ethnicities, tend to feel ashamed because of their disease state. They tend to feel embarrassed, to feel rejected and dejected at times because Normally when we go to visits or even sit on research panels, you get blamed for your condition versus, you know, having empathy for the person or just being grateful that that person can actually show up. I've acquired a bit of success with acceptance, but I had to fight for it. And the way that I fought for it was that I was always raised to understand that no is a complete sentence. I don't have to explain my no. So I know how to get up and walk away from the table. One of the things that I live by is a saying that was told to me well over 10 years ago when I began my kidney disease journey, is this saying that they have: he who owns the table owns what's served. And if I'm not a willing participant or owner of that table, or at least the place setting that's in front of me, that means that I can tolerate and accept anything that's thrown at me. So there's a struggle to have to find my own place setting, to find my own voice, my own path. And now it's become personal because kidney disease has infiltrated my family. I have my next to the youngest son has been on dialysis for 2 years. And I'm seeing some of the same things that not only fighting for or being the face of the faceless and the voice of the voiceless in the communities that I advocated, which are mostly underrepresented, underserved, and disenfranchised communities of color. But now I have to be a protector over my family and my son's disease state. So that's my journey in a nutshell. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change anything because I certainly love to fight. So thank you, man.
Thanks for sharing, Patrick. So many things to reflect on in what you've just said. And I love that statement, no is a full sentence. I've never heard that before, and that's brilliant. I'm going to really reflect on that one. Sabrina, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the challenges you've experienced or noticed?
Sure. I hate following Patrick. That was so good. He dropped so many nuggets of wisdom there. So I'm dealing with a little cognitive dysfunction tonight, guys. So I just wrote a couple of notes just to make sure that I stay on track and say what needs to be said. So I want to give you a little bit of context of kind of what I'm bringing to this equation and who I am. So I'm a person who lives with myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is a complex chronic multisystem, typically post-infectious illness that devastates those impacted. And despite years of excellent research, knowledge, and we have an amazing community, we're still mostly receiving almost no clinical care. Disability supports are scarce and inaccessible, and most of the public have no idea that we exist, because as soon as we get sick or we get sicker, we kind of disappear from view, from work, from society. And so about 7 years or so ago, I decided to get involved in advocacy. That was my original sort of was I thought, well, we need more advocacy. I'll join up with the amazing people that are doing that work. And it didn't take very long before I realized that I couldn't do the advocacy without getting involved in the research work. The two were so interlinked, and there were so many gaps and so many barriers that it had to be addressed in the research space before we could even begin to talk about doing anything else. And so I got involved, and, you know, it's been a journey, honestly. It's a lot of learning and a lot of wonderful people that I've met. And I've had some really high highs, like being with all of you tonight. But also, you know, there are some really low lows doing this work. And I think we don't get very many opportunities to talk about that side of it. You know, we're supposed to always be so grateful for the opportunity. So, you know, oh my goodness, like we couldn't possibly challenge or say that we disagree because we have to be the perfect patient and the perfect patient partner. And, you know, I'm just not that. I've never been perfect. I never will be. I bring what I bring to the table, and I come with humility and a desire to learn. But it is hard sometimes when you're sitting across from people who already feel they have everything figured out, and there is a lack of humility or learning on their end, and it's hard to kind of come together equally. So, you know, I saw some early on, I had mentors, and, you know, a lot of them would say, well, you know, just kind of come in quietly, sit and listen, you know, don't rock the boat, because if you rock the boat, you might not get another opportunity. And then I met some wonderful people who are part of planning this session, for example, and who kind of gave me permission to say, no, it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have different perspectives and opinions. And so, you know, some of the things that I've had to deal with, for example, are sometimes really well-intentioned, amazing researchers who want to do so much good in our community, and we're so thrilled to have them. But the truth of the matter is that there is a learning, and there's sort of an orientation process, and you do have to get to know our illness and get to know us as a community. And we have been a very much a traditionally underfunded community. So you're, you know, expecting us sometimes to be able to provide you with, you know, the right amount of evidence and in the right format. And I sometimes have to remind researchers that because we haven't invested in some of these illnesses that are more complex, chronic, challenging, stigmatized, that doesn't really exist. Sometimes we have only our whisper networks, or we have only our oral histories, or, you know, we may have to communicate things that our community knows to be true. Their knowledge that we all trust in, but we haven't published that somewhere yet because we just haven't partnered with the right people to help us do that. So I think it's really important to kind of, as we come into this as both patient partners and as researchers come into this, to understand that some communities you're going to partner with are going to not have all of the tools and the resources that other communities you may have partnered with have had. And we can start from a place of dialogue and discussion and getting to know each other, talking, asking patients, you know, what is your experience like? What does a typical day look like for you? And being able to kind of be okay with the idea that maybe we all have stuff that we've been taught that we need to unpack. And so as a white woman, I have things that I have to unpack, things that I have to unlearn. And it's the same if somebody has health privilege, you know, they may have to unpack that. I'm a disabled woman, and it's okay to say I'm disabled. There's nothing bad about the word disability. So it's like we have to kind of do some of that work around ableism, the language we use, the way we talk to each other. And we have to be okay with like letting some of that be unpacked together. Some of that work has to happen individually, and being able to like call that out in a space respectfully and say, hey, I'm feeling like this document that's just been given to me maybe needs a little bit of work. Can I take a stab at editing that and adding some thoughts to it, some feedback to it? So I agree with a lot of what Patrick just said too. You know, it's like, I don't think people come into this space knowing how hard the work is going to be or having enough supports to do it. So this is really a great opportunity for us to kind of just normalize the fact that it's hard and give people space to be okay in that discomfort, I guess. And hopefully we can share a few tips about kind of how we've navigated it.
Lots of great nuggets in there as well, Sabrina. I think it's really great that we're talking about how hard it is to be as patient partners, because I hear so often from researchers how hard it is for them to involve patient partners. And so we really need to come to this common understanding. It's not easy for anybody, but, you know, we get better success when we work together. So I think that's a really nice thing to unpack. Lynn, we had lots of discussion in the preparation about how things change as you become more experienced and how that means you notice different things. Can you share a bit about yourself and your journey and what you've noticed and experienced over time?
Yeah. Thanks, Janelle. It's great to be here and be part of this fantastic panel. And I hope that you can understand my accent okay, everyone. So my name's Lynn Laidlaw. I'm a Scot. I come from Scotland, although I'm just moved to England, and I live with a rare autoimmune rheumatic disease, which has caused me to develop lots of long-term conditions. This is such a big topic, isn't it? And there's so many things that I could have talked about, but I'm going to concentrate on the issues that resonate with me, and I really hope that they resonate with everyone in the audience as well. So I think my involvement journey was prompted by a 4-year diagnostic odyssey. And I think it's fair to say that at the beginning, I was just grateful to be involved, you know, just what Sabrina touched on. And at times, I was pathetically grateful. But actually, it didn't take me long to become really ungrateful. And for me, part of that was recognising that an involvement in research is fundamentally about power. Not the power of individuals, but the culture and hierarchy in which research operates, namely in academic institutions and organisations. And I feel that this is often not acknowledged by the institutions that hold the power. And instead, we have this, to me, really uncomfortable paternalistic notion of empowerment. You know, I should be all powerful because so many people think that they're empowering me. It's like, oh, look at us. Aren't we great? We're empowering these patients. We're empowering these public contributors. So what I would ask is, do I only have power in research if an organisation chooses to empower me? Should power not be a right? And I think we have what I like to call the Goldilocks porridge rule of involvement, that people that are involved have to be just right. But we don't have any power over what right is. And in my experience, it's been, they want us to be challenging, but not too challenging. They want us to be knowledgeable, but not too knowledgeable, because if we're too knowledgeable, somehow we're not a patient anymore. You know, well, I've got news for them. The fact that I've become knowledgeable about research hasn't cured any of my conditions. And I think to myself, you know, research is all about knowledge. It's about expertise. It's about valuing that. And why am I the only person in the room that's not allowed to be knowledgeable? And I also realised early on that there was a significant amount of work involved in involvement across multiple domains. And for me, I think the most challenging work has been the emotional work of involvement. And I'm involved because of my experience of living with a rare disease and multiple conditions. And I want research to succeed, you know, because research is hope. And if I didn't think my involvement could help, I wouldn't waste researchers' time, as it's too important. And I think the emotional fallout from situations such as, you know, Sabrina and Patrick have alluded to, such as being taken for granted, used to tick a box on a grant application, can be immense. But also the practical work of being involved can be a challenge. Chasing payment, organising your diary, learning how to comment in Word documents, getting used to Zoom, reading research papers, learning, you know, all these things. And we have to invest in ourselves and our development, because organisations don't. Because I think that often they view us as receptacles of lived experience that can be mined for information, and not as people worth investing in our own right. So I've picked out the lines of work that challenge me the most, but there are many others. And I think we do this work alongside all our other everyday work and illness work. And I just want to finish with the recognition that I'm privileged now, and I no longer have to hunt down opportunities. People come to me. But what I have realised is that relationships are key, and you need to find and work with your tribe, both with other, and by that I mean other public conditioners and researchers. And I've learned that if I don't value myself, no one else will. And that the only power we often have is to walk away from people, projects and organisations that don't value and respect us. And I wonder if the ultimate challenge is perhaps getting to a situation where you recognise you aren't being valued and feeling actually that you can do something about it. Thank you.
Oh, I had a few shivers with some of that stuff that you said, Lynn. I love that idea that patients are often treated as receptacles to be mined rather than people to be invested in. But that is that really sums up so much of what I see. And so I'm going to think more about that one too. In listening to you all, there can be some real challenges, I think, in being heard and valued as partners. So I'm going to direct a question at each of you around the issue of confidence. But any of you are welcome to join in and jump in at any time if you have something to add to what you each share. So Patrick, you raised some issues that are not issues just for patient partners in research, but cut across a lot of areas of society in general. What are your thoughts on having the confidence to speak up, get your voice heard in research? Is it really any different to other parts of life?
I would say it depends on your situation. So with me living with a medical affliction, yes, it is. Because when you think about African Americans or people of African descent, very rarely are we invited to participate in clinical trials, as an example. So the medications that I'm prescribed, I'm not sure if they work for me. Now, when you look at research and you see, irregardless of race, ethnicity, or nationality, there's really no difference. We are 99.999% alike. But it's when medical researchers, scientists, doctors add the ethnicity or the race factor into it. And sometimes you really get lost. So, so it just depends on the situation that you're in. Now, the confidence comes from being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And in that, I mean that sometimes, I have this saying, when you hit rock bottom is, in some people's mind, a very bad place to be. But when you hit rock bottom, all you have is a vision of looking upwardly. So when your back is on the ground and you've been knocked down so many times, all you have to do now is just find the faith, the strength, and the stamina to pull yourself up and allow your voice to be heard. As Lynn was talking, I saw a comment that came through the chat from somebody named Fez, and I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that right. Fez, this message is to you. Folks will find you, they will see you, they will come to you. You continue being you. Sometimes we tend to change our personalities over the word privilege. I like how Lynn broke it down. Sometimes we have to find our own place of privilege and not what society deems as a privilege. It's a privilege for me today to be on this panel. It's a privilege for me to listen to my patient partner's extraordinary journey. It's a privilege to be able to read some of the comments that are being, written and shared in the chat. But most of all, it's a privilege to be alive. And as long as I'm alive, that means that I stand a great chance of being able to speak out on things that I really find disrespectful, disheartening, and just downright negative. And so for me, that's how I find my confidence, being able to wake up just to see another day, knowing that hopefully I have the energy to go out. I don't focus on myself, but I focus on serving others, again, that may not have the platform to be able to speak up for themselves.
I admire your courage and that thought that when you're at rock bottom, all you can do is look up. I think it does take a lot of energy to to constantly do that and to stand up all the time. And so thank you that you do that, and thank you to everyone that is online and here in the panel that does that every single day. You're inspiring to me. Lynn, reflecting on how things have changed as you got more experience, how did you learn to be more confident in asking for what you need, valuing if your input was of value, maybe walking away?
Yeah, so thanks, Janelle. I think for me, it was becoming more reflexive. And so that sort of reflexive practice is recognizing how our values, beliefs, biases, and experience share our thoughts and shape our thoughts and actions. And I've had the privilege again of actually doing some research as working as a peer or patient researcher. But then as I say that, I think, why can't I just call myself a researcher? Why do I have to qualify it? So anyway, I got this opportunity to do some research, some qualitative research, and I embraced this reflexivity actually to the extent that it got a bit distressing because I couldn't switch it off. But that's another story. And I recognised that imposter syndrome was a huge thing for me, especially working as a peer researcher. And imposter syndrome probably often goes hand in hand with being a woman. But lots of people have imposter syndrome. And I realised that was getting in the way of me being what I could be. And, being involved in co-producing research and doing research has really impacted on my identity. Am I a patient or a researcher? Could I be both? Would people allow me to be both? And I think we love to put people into boxes, don't we? And I'm growing a bit kind of about the term lived experience. Surely it's just experience. Why do we put people, well, you're the lived experience and you're in the learned experience box? And I also realised that much of my identity came from how I thought other people perceive me. But, I think that involvement in co-production and all these other things can impact on everyone's identity in research, including researchers. And part of becoming more confident was realizing that, I'm not the only one having these thoughts. And, and it's okay to think about this, and it's okay to try and work it out. And, I kind of feel that we need to get to a situation where all knowledge and experience is valued equally. And that we go back to the power again. And that means getting rid of the hierarchies for us all to feel comfortable and contributing and working together. And you know what? When that happens, it's just the best feeling in the world. When you just feel that, everyone's on board and you're just working together as equals. Yeah.
I can totally relate to that feeling of imposter syndrome, as well as, what is my identity? I've had this experience as I've moved from being a clinical trials professional to advocating for the needs of the community, that I'm no longer contacted about my clinical trials experience. I'm no longer even introduced as someone with clinical trials experience. I'm introduced as the consumer voice. And it's been really hard for me to figure out what that means to my identity. And I mean, I should be proud of that, but I'm also going, but, I've got all this other experience that adds value to what I contribute. So I totally get that. I love the idea of lived experience versus learned experience. That's I haven't heard that term before. That's a nice one. Sabrina, both you and Lynn have talked to issues of identity and being confident about what you bring to the table. What are your thoughts about the value you bring versus perceptions researchers may have of patient partners? How do you demonstrate and communicate that value to teams, or protect yourself in situations where a team may not get it?
That's such a great question. And I spent a lot of time initially trying to sort of defend my spot at the table when I could get one. Much like Patrick talked about fighting, I've got good fight in me. I'm not a fighter necessarily by nature, but I've learned how to fight for survival and how to fight for my spot. And when I got my spot, that would be great. Then I would sort of, again, going back to trying to be the good patient partner, then, trying to explain why I'm there, what I might be able to offer. I spent a lot of time trying to do that in the beginning. And what I've learned is that, one, it matters more if it comes from somebody else other than you. So Dawn, who's a big part of this planning of this conference, Dawn has been really good to me as a mentor and has really helped to kind of nudge me forward and says nice things about me, I think, when she puts me forward for things. And it seems to matter more if she says it than if I say it. It seems to matter more, Dawn's one example, but, Dr. Khan has been really good to me as well. And same thing, puts me forward as somebody who's very knowledgeable. It does seem to matter more if it comes from them than if it comes from me. So I've learned to kind of just roll with that, which I guess brings me to one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that a lot of this isn't about us. It's not about me. When the system doesn't treat me the way it's supposed to, that's not really about me. That's a systemic problem. So I've had to learn what's systemic and what's personal. And it all feels personal when you're a patient partner, especially when, your life is depending on the research being done well, the clinical care being safe, the medical education being done fast enough. It feels very personal, and it is very personal. And I'm proud to be personally invested in the research that I'm trying to push forward. But at the same time, I'm dealing with systems that have been there for far too long and are far too broken to be my fault. So I had to stop kind of wearing some of the brokenness and understand, okay, this project's going to come with some brokenness. There's going to be some systems that don't work. There's going to be some hierarchy that's going to be really challenging. How do I navigate that? And if it's not working, is that my fault? Is that about Sabrina? Or is Sabrina being, sitting at the table, being a part of this, it could have been anybody. So it's not about me. It's about the system has been a big lesson. I think that's made things a little bit easier. And now when I work with patient partners and try to bring them into projects, I do spend a little time talking about how the system is broken, and that's going to have an impact on the work that we're doing. It's going to be slower than we would like. It's going to take longer. It's going to go around in circles. This is all very frustrating. I'm preparing you for that so that you can go in ready to kind of face some of that and to not be knocked down when that happens, because that's not about you. You're awesome. We're all awesome. We're going to do awesome work, but we're not going to change that stuff overnight. So, it's like making a conscious effort to tackle it one step at a time while still getting the work done over here, trying to hold two truths at the same time. Not always easy, but part of what I think we need to do a better job of preparing patient partners for, because to bring them in and kind of give them this rosy, beautiful picture of, a check at the end or a gift card at the end. And, everybody's so excited to have you. And like, that isn't how I've been brought into projects. And I've appreciated the honesty and the generosity of spirit to tell me the truth sometimes when things were going to be tough, so that I could prepare myself accordingly. And I think it's important to remember that patient partners, and I'm with you, Lynn, I can't stand that we have to qualify lived experience and patient partners. And I'm just a partner. I'm just as important as any other partner at the table, just as knowledgeable, and I'm just as flawed as any other partner at the table. But I think, being able to come together and have those tough conversations and support each other as we're doing the work really does make a difference, and lifting each other up when it goes badly. I'm so grateful for some of the people that are on this call today, and for so many others in the community who've taken the time with me to help me when I hit walls and didn't know what to do. And I've only walked away once. I did regret it afterwards, but I think there was a lot of lessons learned in that experience. And at the time, it was the right call. And I think what I learned from it was the right thing. So also, I think one of the other lessons is, it's important to look backwards and kind of learn, but it's also important to acknowledge that sometimes things happen the way they happen for a reason. And maybe there was a reason why it all shaped up the way it did. And maybe this is the better path. And maybe we can move forward and start afresh with someone that maybe we walked away from on another project. And this time, before engaging, we'll say, hey, these are the things that are important to me. Are these things important to you? Excellent. I think I'm excited about this project again. I'm excited about this team. I think we need to give people permission to have not only the reality, but then the conversations at the beginning, And yesterday, some of that was touched on, and I thought it was so important to like acknowledge at the beginning where people are at, what they need. I have a disability. I have a few disabilities. And so, for example, even just a researcher saying, hey, you know, I know you live with ME. Is there anything I can do to make this experience a little bit easier, a little bit more respectful, a little bit more accessible? I mean, I love that question. Even if you can't give me everything I'm going to ask for, the question is important. I appreciate the intent and the care for each other as humans. So anyways, I offer that as some things I think that researchers can do that is really low hanging, really easy. Like ask your patient partners what they need, get to know them a little bit, and don't strip them of everything they come with just because they happen to be sick. I mean, we are sick and this work is hard to be done sick, but I'm more than just my sickness. I had a whole career before I got sick. I know a lot of things. Don't strip that from me the second I walk into your room.
Such powerful conversations. I was reflecting on that statement that you made, Sabrina, about your experience is more valued when someone introduces you in. And I wonder if that's because, you know, relationships are built on trust, and that's a way of speeding up the trust and really getting that conversation going. So I don't know. And yeah, just something for me to reflect on at least. I'm also very impatient. So the biggest learning I've had is that things take time. Things don't always go in a straight line. But, you know, that impatience is what keeps us in the conversation, keeps us driving it forward. So I'd noticed there is a question that I know that Patrick is absolutely going to want to answer, because we had this question many times during our discussion, and it's Karen. So we see that there is an underrepresentation of men in this space. What do you think are what do you think are the barriers for men getting involved, for us getting more diversity in patient advocacy roles from a gender perspective?
You know, that's interesting because this is true. Most of the webinars and committees that I serve on within the United States and abroad, I represent a very small population of men being at the table. I don't know if it's an identity crisis. I don't know if it's a failure of men wanting to be transparent. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Not sure if we might have just briefly lost Patrick there. Oh, we've lost myself. I will I'll come back to Patrick there. Hopefully he will join us back in a moment.
I'm sorry. One thing to consider is that one, women outnumber men at least 7-1 in the United States, and I'm imagining more all over the world, yet and still the society tends to box women in as a minoritized group, which I find very interesting. I also want to share with those in the audience what I shared with the panel before we came on. If you look in Holy Scripture in the first chapter of Proverbs, it says Lady Wisdom. So automatically right there, for me, I know that women are much smarter than men. Now, I don't know how many men would concede that, but I'm certainly here telling you right now that what has been shared here today has been very therapeutic and very healing for me. To know that I'm not in this fight by myself, that I will go to any lengths for my panel mates or anybody in the audience. And I don't need to know where you live. I don't need your telephone number, but because you are a human being. I think trying to get more men involved should be a charge of action that we really need to do this, because I think as a collective, we need everybody, young, old, children. We need everybody to step up and embrace our humanity on all levels.
Some very wise and powerful words there, Patrick. I'm not even going to try and summarize that. You've done that so well. I will not necessarily concede that women are smarter than men. I think we bring different things to the table and perhaps different perspectives and ways of looking at the world. But I think just as the difference between patient partners and researchers, we have to acknowledge what we all bring to the table. So, but thank you. I'm sure there is a lot of people. I know Lady Wisdom resonated with Karen at least. One thing just briefly that I don't think we have touched on is how that self-care aspect. So sometimes things get emotionally hard, sometimes things really build up, sometimes we take on too much and just have to step away for a moment. How do you guys do that? Sabrina.
Ooh, this is an area I am not very good at. I think, my community struggles so, the struggle is so deep and it's so broad. I mean, we had, maybe 30 million people living with ME and comorbidities, and we're complex because of all the comorbidities that bang into each other, which just adds to the confusion. But we had about 30 million people around the world before the pandemic. We've likely doubled, tripled that number at this point. And yet most people, it's the biggest crisis most people don't even know is there. So it's kind of hard to turn it off and walk away. Because I am so sick, my illness eventually shuts me down and I have to sort of take a break. But I think a lot of us, that especially I think for really stigmatized, misunderstood, kind of in the shadows illnesses, I think it's really hard to walk away from this work. Even if you know you should, even if you know self-care principles, even if all of that is incredibly important, all I can think about when I go to bed at night is how many millions of people are suffering and how we need a sense of urgency. Like, where is the urgency to fix these problems? And so I almost can't kind of turn that off well. So I look forward to hearing the wonderful answers that I'm going to hear, because I'm sure I'm going to learn some useful, wonderful things. But I think it is a real problem. And I think, I work very closely in the long COVID community, and the long COVID researchers and clinicians and patient partners and advocates, it's the same challenge, right? They have a hard time walking away from it because the need is so large. So I think one of the things that will make it easier for me some point to put this work down is having more allies, having more champions, having more people in positions of power, taking their power and using it. This conference is a wonderful example of taking power and sharing it out amongst, wonderful people who bring a ton of skills to the table. So kudos to everyone who helped to put this together. But this is a good example of what needs to happen more. We need to have people who have access to funding and access to resources take themselves out of the equation a little bit and empower other people to have those access points. And to Lynn's point, I don't want to be empowered by other people all the time, but there is a moment at which we have to acknowledge that some people have more resources and more power at the table. And I can't change things on my own, no matter the amount of passion or drive or excitement. I can't change it on my own. So if the people who have access to those connections, those conversations, those tables are not involved in doing the work, I will never be able to step away and do self-care. It will always seem as an almost selfish thought, as long as the work isn't being carried out somewhere else. So what I need is for enough people to be in the mix here, to be doing this work, so that I can take a break and not feel guilty about it, because I know it's in good hands. And we have millions of wonderful patient partners the world over doing this work. But we need more healthy people. We need more access to the individuals who get to make the big decisions. And we need a sense of urgency to get to answers faster and treatments faster. And so, yeah, I guess I didn't really answer your question, but for me, that's kind of where I'm at with self-care. I can't even entertain the notion of it really until we get to a better place for my community and the people that I care about.
And I think that capacity building issue is something that maybe will be PxP 24's topic of choice, because how we build capacity and share the work so that we can have self-care is really important. Patrick or Lynn, did you want to make a comment there?
So I've been through an interesting process recently. So I think, like I was saying, I had a bit of an identity crisis, you know, especially when I did a bit of my own research. And I realised that I needed some help, because I think what I've come to realise is there is nothing in my previous life that has prepared me for the things that I'm doing now, and involvement and all the strands of work that involves. So I recognise that, and I was really fortunate to know, and I suspect a lot of people in the audience will know her, wonderful person called Sally Crowe, who worked in involvement for years and years and has given up, but has a coaching qualification. And we had talked about the need actually for investing in public contributors and maybe the need for coaching. So I was doing some work with an organisation, and I said to them, you know, rather than remunerating me, could you pay for me to have some coaching? And they said yes, because they understood why it was important. And it's just been so good. And I just want to pick up on, you know, a word that Sabrina used, which was selfish. And that felt very selfish. It felt very indulgent to kind of put me and my needs first. But I was in a situation where I just wasn't saying no, and I was working all hours. And, you know, and I think sometimes in patient partnership, you work so hard to get where you are. It's very difficult to say no, because you think, is it all going to disappear and whatever. So I think what she has helped me do is to work through my identity crisis, come to terms, enable me to take up some of the strategic opportunities that I've been offered recently, and also to practice some self-care. So I'm not working on a Friday anymore. It's just been, and actually we're going to write something together about this process, and because we really want organisations to think, and I go back again to, I'm worth investing in as an individual, not just as a repository of kind of lived experience. And it's been so fantastic for me to have that opportunity. Yeah.
I think it's also important to recognise that when you're reliving stories and providing that all the time, you know, there's this element of trauma as well. So just recognising that impact to people, and the need to sometimes just step away or not tell your story, and to be very mindful about who you share your story with. Patrick, did you have anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, you know, I can certainly respect where Sabrina is coming from, especially when you know, you love people, you want to help everybody, you know, you want to see folks heal, be comfortable and succeed. But when Lynn mentioned about self-care, my pastor sat me down, and he always told me that self-care is not selfish, and you need self-care. And then he reminded me, God rested on the seventh day, and you're not God, so you need to take a break. So what he has taught me to do is to kind of organize better organizational skills in time management. You prioritize what you know is your passion, what's most important. And you also have to understand that, again, no is a complete sentence. Some things and some people you have to be able to walk away from, especially if you know that they can be very draining for you. There are organizations that will leave me completely depleted. And now that I've been able to recognize that, I know how to turn off my phone, turn off my pad, turn off the TV, pick up a good book, and just sit back and find myself, because it's almost like self-therapy. And we really need that, because from a mental health standpoint, if you don't take care of yourself, and you become so available to everybody and everything, that you literally have this complex of, the world cannot go on if I'm not doing something. And trust and believe, when it's your time to go home, the world keeps going. So that it took me a long time to get to that point. And now that I am at that point, I'm able to relax, rest, spend time with my grandkids and things like that. And it has helped me to really appreciate the work that I do.
Thank you. Now, I know we're bang on the 9 minutes, so I am apologising again for perhaps going 5 minutes over. I just want to perhaps get 30 seconds rather than a minute from each of the panelists. We've talked a lot about the problems. It may have scared people off even doing this work. What advice would you give to yourself if you were starting into it again? Would you do it? Would you do it again? What do you think? So I'm going to start with you, Lynn.
Yeah, so I think for me it would be believe in yourself and your value, and don't hesitate to walk away from toxic situations. And that doesn't mean you're failing if you do, but actually, you know what? I really want to end on a positive note, because involvement has given me so much, and it's kind of bittersweet that actually it took becoming unwell to do that. And I've been given opportunities I could only have dreamed of, like being part of the session. And, you know, I think given everything, it's been worth it. I was forced to retire at age 50 due to ill health. It made me feel like I had no value to society, and involvement has given me back that sense of self-worth, and I feel I have a purpose. And yeah.
That's so beautiful. I'm sure you had a purpose outside of that, Lynn, but that's beautiful. Sabrina.
Yeah, so I mean, would I do it again? Absolutely. The people I've met, the things I've learned, the impact I think I've been able to have in small ways that hopefully ripple out. I think we all are creating ripples and maybe don't always see where things end up with something, but you know, you got to put a lot of good out into the world and hope it translates. And so for me, I think it would be, my lesson to myself would be to trust in my ability to learn. I don't need to know everything right away. I can learn it over time. People will teach it to me. There is no more generous community in the world than the patient partnership community, or consumer community. You know, it's a very loving community that will take the time to help you with the things you don't know. Stay humble, you know, as Patrick said, you know, the world ticks on without us, and we're not the be all and end all, but we are important, and we do have a role to play, and we do have a responsibility. And so, you know, take that and kind of go with it. And then really recognizing what's systemic versus personal, and being able to separate those two things. And I guess maybe going back to the self-care, which I don't think is selfish. I was just saying sometimes I feel like it's a little selfish, but what I was going to say is it's, I think, so important to understand that systemic versus personal piece, because for me, that has been part of my self-care. I'm not wearing some of the heavy things that I had the first few years. I kind of let those things go and just focus on where can I have impact. And, you know, who knows what legacy we leave behind, but that's a pretty good one, I think, for me to be able to try and do something good with something negative that's happened.
Well, I have no doubt everybody on this panel, as well as everybody that's engaged in this conversation, because it's been a fantastic chat as well. I haven't been able to get to that as much as I'd like. But you're all leaving a legacy that is important to the world. Patrick, last words from you.
Would I do this all over again? Yes. But before I start, I would read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations that was developed December the 10th, 1948. And even though it's long, I do want to read the last paragraph because I really think it hits home. It says, proclaim this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all people and all nations, to the end that every individual and organ of society keeping this declaration constantly in mind shall strive by teaching and to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance, both among the people of member states themselves and among the people of territories under their jurisdiction. That covers everything, everybody that is human. The only folks that are left out are UFOs. And we will deal with those when they can prove that they exist.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, we can look to space for the future. For now, I would like to thank all my panelists for your amazing wisdom that you've shared today, your personal insights. I know I've got a lot to think about from what you've said. And with that, I'd also like to thank everybody in the audience that has engaged in the chat. We didn't get to quite all the questions. I will share this from James. We've been indoctrinated to believe that healthcare is for and from women. I haven't said that very well. Men do care but are hiding under the pile. So we invite you to come out from under the pile. And with that, I'll pass back to Jo to close the session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Janelle, and thank you, Lynn, Sabrina, and Patrick. I know we went a little bit over, but I'm sure you'll all agree that it was worth it. What an excellent, honest, vulnerable panel. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories, your experiences, your challenges, and your hope with us. And thank you to everyone in the audience for your attention and engagement. There's been great discussion in the chat and great questions asked. We're going to take a break now for about 24 minutes. We'll come back at 1/2 the hour, unless you're on that half hour in Australia, that I know that time zone always gets me screwed up. But we'll be back at 5:30 p.m. for me. I'm not sure what time that will be for you. And the next session will be on including all voices, examples, and advice for doing better when working with communities historically excluded from health research, which I think is a great next session after this one. Again, we'll be back in about 24 minutes. Look forward